Today, I am joined by Michael Leonard, who is a debut author, author of the science fiction novel Pilgrims. Michael, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Oh, I'm blurring my own book. I'll do that later. Thanks so much for having me on, Robin. I really appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. So, your debut novel, Pilgrims, came out last year. I think it was November 24 came out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a really interesting novel. It's a kind of alien invasion narrative with some religious themes. Um, I recently listened to the audiobook, which Michael kindly sent me, which I thought was an excellent production. The audiobook, the quality of the audiobook itself, but also the story, I thought had very interesting themes, quite engaging characters, and a fascinating and immersive story. Uh, so perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to getting Pilgrims being published as your first novel.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, Pilgrims is my debut novel. It's set in the near future, and it's about a washed up Latin teacher who tries to save the world from Catholic aliens. And as my first novel, it was kind of a winding road that brought me to write this particular story. I'm from Boston. I grew up here. I went to college here, undergraduate, and then after college, I kind of went on a winding career. First working in the legal profession, and then I became a China consultant. That's basically for American companies that want to enter the Chinese market. And then I went to MIT for graduate school, and then after that, I did startups. So it's not exactly the typical background of a literary person, although I don't really know precisely what that is. But the whole time, I kind of had this creative bug on me, in just kind of running in the background as I did all this business stuff. And I think I had the idea for this novel as a young boy in catechism, or CCD, we called it here, or you could call it Sunday school. I think some teacher was going on about how the resurrection of Jesus was a historical event, which was probably something I had never heard before. Which that doesn't speak the highest of my catechesis, but that was so at least a new enough concept to me. And at the same time, I'm a huge like little kid who's really into aliens, science fiction, unsolved mysteries, the stuff on the Discovery Channel about ancient aliens. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, if that really happened, the aliens who have obviously been here since, prehistory can just kind of tell us what happened. And so I had that. I think I thought, well, that would solve all the world's problems if the aliens just announce, whether that historical event did or did not occur. And I went on through my youth, not really thinking much about it, but I was reminded when I started reading The Three Body Problem a number of years ago by Cixin Liu, Chinese author. It's been turned into a show on Amazon now at this point. So it's a great series. I highly recommend it. And that is a story about aliens from Alpha Centauri basically coming to Earth to invade, except their journey is going to take about 400 years. And it's a brilliant, brilliant work of science fiction. But I found myself reading it with all sorts of qualms. And I think that reminded me of aliens coming to Earth to tell us what actually happened in 33 AD in Judea. And I started thinking about it more as an adult and going, oh, that would be really fascinating. And I don't think everything would be happily ever after if they did that. In fact, I think it would be very contentious. And more to the point, I think it'd be really dramatic. And I'd really love to see that depicted. I hope someone writes that book. And like a lot of authors, you're kind of sitting there going, well, I don't think anyone's going to write that particular book. And I'd really like to read it myself. So you're kind of forced to do what a lot of people uh, try not to do. And there were certainly many moments where I tried not to, which is write the book yourself. So that became Pilgrims. And that's what brought us here today. So.
Okay, fascinating. Um, I think the Three Body Problem is actually a Netflix series rather than Amazon.
Is it Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I know.
But
I know it's the guys who did Game of Thrones, the Daves.
oh yeah, 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 great series. Um, so yeah, so when you first approached me and you told me about this book, the thing that immediately intrigued me was the concept of Catholic aliens, right? And this is kind of at the heart of this story. There is a mystery. Who are the pilgrims? Why are they here? And why are they Catholic? Because we seem to have a race of Latin speaking Roman Catholic extraterrestrials. And I thought it was a really interesting concept. So that's kind of that that pitch sold me on the book. I had to know what this is about, and I think it really delivers. I think this book it has some interesting themes, some interesting ideas, and it raises some quite profound questions about the nature of faith and religion and what would happen if we were to meet extraterrestrials who have an earthly religion. So yeah, I kudos to you for turning that into a story.
Yeah, that people ask me, did I come at this book as a Catholic or a sci-fi fan? What was more dominant? And I have to say, like, it was probably the sci-fi fan, if I'm being totally honest, because I I just thought it would be interesting to really pick apart. Well, I really like high concept premises. So a high concept premise, just to define it, or at least the way I use the term, is like, what if the Confederacy won the U.S. Civil War? That's the South. Or what if the Axis had won World War II? And you get the book The Man in the High Castle by I forget who it's by, but they that was on an Amazon series. So Philip K. Dick. That's right. And so high concept premises are just really fun to play with. I think they get a lot of people really interested, including myself. And I think I have two high concept premises in this novel. The first is it's very similar to the three body problem because the three body problem, the aliens are taking 400 years to arrive on Earth. Like, what do we do? The difference in the three body problem is the aliens kind of announce what they're going to do. All of the Earthlings find out the motivations of the aliens very early on and have centuries to kind of adapt. Whereas I kind of do it differently. Humans discover aliens coming to Earth 5 years, or when the book starts, aliens were discovered coming to Earth 5 years prior, and we have no idea why they're coming. No one has any clue. And that's high concept premise number one. Like, what does Earth look like when an alien ship's approaching with no communication? How do we react? That's only a small part of the book, though. That's probably the first quarter. By a quarter into it, we find out why they're coming. They're here because they're purporting to be Catholic. And then that's the second high concept premise. What happens when aliens arrive and endorse one human religion? And in my book's case, in particular, Roman Catholicism. And how would the world react? It's so I really liked playing with that. And what struck me is I'd often say to some of my fellow sci-fi authors and even to some readers who talk to me, um, I don't understand why this book wasn't written in like the golden age in like the 1950s. I always thought there'd be a subgenre of aliens show up to Earth and are X religion. You could, get alien religions. We've seen a little of that. Maybe like Alien Missionaries, Stargate SG-1 does that a little bit, especially in the later seasons. You get them coming just to tell you all the world religions are wrong. They're just like trolls on the internet. They're just like, all right, guys, we're gonna set the record straight. Or you get the Buddhist aliens, the Hindu aliens, the Islamic aliens, the Jain aliens, the Catholic aliens, the Lutheran aliens, the Jewish aliens. I don't know why that's not like a subgenre that had like, played itself out in the 50s and you can buy those books, but no one reads them nowadays. It shocked me that no one had written this high concept premise because I felt like it was just low hanging fruit. Because there's so much to do with it, no matter what direction you go in. And I have a particular direction. I like the way I took it. I take it very seriously. I think that you could be very flip about writing religious aliens showing up on Earth, and you get readers for that story. But I think readers are actually going to appreciate that I handle these things with sincerity and care. That even if you're not religious, makes it a lot more interesting to read, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so. We had a brief discussion before we started this call, and I was just saying that the only kind of similar thing that I've come across in my reading, i.e., aliens with an earthly religion, was in Philip Jose Farmer's book Jesus on Mars, in which we've got a race of Orthodox Jews get discovered on Mars, which I thought was a fascinating premise, but he approaches it in a much more kind of whimsical way. Whereas I think your approach to this first contact story is more credible. And without wishing to spoil anything, I think the reason why these aliens claim to be Catholic is really fascinating. I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of this whole mystery. And it is kind of believable. And it profoundly challenges the human nature of what is faith and this kind of thing. And I have to say, another aspect of your book, which I was impressed with, was your character building. So we've got quite an interesting. It's quite a small cast, I think, but the protagonist, who you briefly introduced as a washed-up Latin teacher,
Hmm.
he's not a typical hero, is he? He's quite a flawed character in many ways, and he in some ways he's quite self-centered. He's quite nihilistic, especially early on in the book. But perhaps you could tell us a bit about how you created this character and what were you trying to achieve with him?
Yeah, sure. I have been told that I have a community theater level cast of characters in my book. There's really four people who get the most attention, and there's other people, but I feel like this could be adapted to the stage pretty readily because the number of humans that are or characters that are relevant is not that extreme, which some people appreciate when they're reading a book, especially in sci-fi. Sometimes the worlds can get really big and the number of characters can get pretty outrageous too. So if that's your thing, that's one of the benefits of my book. It's a very easy. There's a handful of characters to really follow. With regard to the protagonist, Austin DeSantis, I kind of why so I say on the back cover that my book is a sci-fi retelling of Augustine's Confessions. Now, just for those who don't know, Saint Augustine was a saint in the early 400s, but he essentially pioneered the genre of memoir as we know it. So anytime you've picked up a memoir, it comes from basically this one ancient Roman from around the year 400. And so while he's kind of a seminal figure in the Catholic Church and in Christian thinking uh, in that direction. He's also seminal literarily in the Western canon. You really, he's at Shakespeare's level of importance. And he wrote a book, The Confessions, which was a memoir of his own life, where he kind of pours his heart out about his biography. Most biographies up to that point are mythic kind of biographies. You know, someone is writing about the king or the emperor, and they're almost deliberately making it sound almost divine or exaggerating like that was the expectation. And there was a certain amount of like letters, like Caesar's letters from when he was taking over Gaul, but no one went for just straight up authenticity that would be highly appreciated in our TikTok age. But St. Augustine did in the year 400. So it just broke the mold of sort of the things that were going on. And in addition to just making a major literary kind of advancement, uh, his story is just very compelling. He's essentially, just a Roman boy, yeah, living in ancient Rome. His mother is a Christian. Um, like most young boys, he doesn't particularly admire that. He loves his mom, but he thinks, oh, that weak thinking woman, like, of course she would have this soft religion. His father's a Roman. It's in Carthage near in North Africa, but in the Roman Empire. So his father's just a pure Roman citizen. He's excited to see that Austin, or excuse me, St. Augustine has hit puberty, so he can start taking him out to show him the women. All like it's a very strange background, and we know the story in the book is how he goes from that he's really smart, so he's writing speeches for the Roman emperor, which is like he's risen to the top of the field in a very competitive world. He is at the top, but he's deeply unhappy and there's something missing. And it's a story from how he goes from that to Christianity. And later, because he lives beyond after he finished that book to one of the most seminal figures in Christianity, which is one heck of an arc, if you ask me. So we have to start with Austin in kind of a rough shape, just like the real Saint Augustine. Like it's our hero is not in a great spot, and more particularly going back to the high concept premise. Alien ships approaching Earth. We don't know if they're friend or foe. We just know generally when they're going to get here because we're watching them approach. We can do the math. And some people think, oh, I can't wait. It's like Christmas. Like, I can't wait till arrival day. That is the best thing ever. Some people are indifferent. They just go about living their lives. Some people probably spend the first year panicking. And like a lot of things in life, you just get used to the new reality and you don't think about them. And some people think it's the end of the world. And I just wanted to show the range of reactions. And when we meet Austin, he is convinced that in a few days, the world is going to end when these aliens arrive. And that allows him to do some pretty terrible things right at the beginning of the book. But I wanted it to be at least relatable to the reader that maybe if not themselves, maybe someone they know, they could picture making the similar bad decisions. So I wanted him to be really flawed, but at least the kernel of relatability and hope. And so I hope I struck that balance. A lot of readers have thought so. I could see how if I pushed it a little further, I probably would have lost everyone. But I could see myself in Austin's shoes, and I think that helps carry the story a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's definitely flawed, but he's also a sympathetic character. So he's kind of frustrating but relatable, and um, it is kind of a redemption arc in many ways. This story, isn't it? Um, and he reminded me in some ways to I forget his name now, but the main character in Project Hail Mary.
Sure. Yeah, I
Yeah,
forget the name
yeah.
too. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
who in both cases they were kind of the teachers, right? With specialist fields. In Austin's case, he specializes in oral Latin. Okay. And this is how he comes to the attention of the authorities, and he ends up being recruited by the US government because the aliens come to Earth speaking Latin, and there aren't many people who specialize in spoken Latin, and so he gets recruited as a kind of interpreter, and this is kind of like an opportunity for him to kind of turn his life around, possibly. That at least that's how it starts off.
That's how it starts off. It
Yeah,
gets a little bit more, convoluted, right?
definitely. Yeah.
Uh, the I get to play with what was kind of fun about the book is the world in which my characters exist is meant to be kind of like I say, it's set in the near future. So it's a world like ours. It's not a totally different world. So in our world, when aliens arrive, they pop open the hatch on the I don't know, stereotypically the White House lawn, and they say, "Take me to your leader," and the presumption is the U.S. president. So that's more or less what the humans in our world are expecting to happen when the aliens show up. But instead, they pop the hatch at the Vatican and say, "Can we have an audience with the Pope?" And just like in our world, one would expect, that's about as shocking as anything else. And with regard to the oral Latin, I just like the idea of I don't know how useful oral Latin is in today's world, but I can tell you if an alien ship was approaching our planet and was going to be here in 5 years, whatever utility oral Latin has today goes down. So we can divide that by some factor. And ironically, that ends up being a very important skill all of a sudden when the aliens are asking for an audience with the Pope in Latin. They're opting to speak in Latin to everyone's chagrin. So, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where they do that light show, it, that's not the interaction I was considering. They're just speaking plain old fashioned Latin, and that's kind of a funny twist on the whole thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's in a way it's quite timely that we're talking about this now. We've got the newer Pope is shortly to be appointed. I don't think he's been appointed yet as of the timing of this recording, but it is
There was
pretty
black smoke last time I checked, but we are
yeah.
talking in the midst of a conclave.
Yeah, so it's probably a good thing that the aliens don't arrive now because we'd have to keep them waiting. But
Yeah, yeah, that would be very inconvenient in their many decades or centuries long journey. They arrive right at the time of a conclave. That would have been funny if when you're an author, you get all sorts of choices, and that would have been an interesting direction to go at. Maybe if someone wants to, write a derivative version of my book, that can be the problem. But yeah, no, a lot of readers have reached out and been like, "I read your book, and it's. Did you plan this? Did you plan for there to be a conclave when your book was coming out?" And no, but I'll take it. So tell all your friends if they want to understand what's happening in Rome, they should read Pilgrims. They'll definitely figure it out.
speaking of which, I'm not sure if we mentioned it yet or not, but pilgrims is what the term that this alien race ends up being known as on Earth, right? So perhaps
Yes.
you could talk a little bit about your conception of the pilgrims as an extraterrestrial race. What do they look like? What is their level of technology?
As far as the aliens go, I wanted my aliens to be aliens. It's not Star Trek with just like throw a bunch of makeup on that actor. We have we have limited budget, so he has a ridge on his skull. That's how we know he's an alien. I just like the idea of aliens being really alien towards us. So this is somewhat in the novel. Maybe there'll be a little bit extra in this interview, but the alien the pilgrims are essentially they're they're orthogonal to humans in the following ways. They are somewhat aquatic. They can exist on land, but they look something like cuttlefish if you put them on top of a camera tripod and made them vertical and over like 50 feet tall. So they're gigantic. They live thousands of years. They live in like a Kardashev 2 type of civilization. So um, not like a full Dyson sphere or swarm, but like close to that, such that they have quadrillions of members of their species at this point. They are way smarter than humanity, way more rational. They're less emotional than we are. They're kind of more just the facts, Jack. And then as far as a creature like that, they actually grew up in a lower gravity well. So I think I say 0.79 Gs in the book. And all of this is relatively early in the story. So this isn't really a big spoiler or anything. But it makes it very uncomfortable to be on Earth's gravity well. And on top of the fact that they're smart and they know they look bizarre and horrific to human beings. So what do? I mean, a Kardashev 2 situation, it's kind of trivial, or civilization, it's trivial to generate machines to do a lot of your work, and including interacting with humans. So they generate these very humanoid shaped but very clearly robotic machines that interact with humans, and the humans dub them diplomats, those machines, because that's who they're talking to most of the time. So think more like Bender from Futurama than Replicant from Blade Runner. They are just
Right.
metal. They're the Tin Man. And I also like that. And I think the Pilgrims do that deliberately because we don't want any uncanny valley stuff. We want like this is a machine, you won't mistake it, but it's like got arms and legs and a torso and a head. That's a lot easier to talk to than a giant squid.
Yeah, Sunday. And is one of these diplomats called Virgil, who is kind of the main representative of the pilgrims to humanity, or at least in the context of this story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He becomes Austin's primary interlocutor with the aliens. This alien robot that he more or less befriends relatively early.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about sort of your experience of getting this book published. And what are the challenges of being a self-published author, and how do you go about sort of publicizing this book and letting people know about this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said, I came from a business background before I got into the writing. And I learned a lot in business that you can have the most brilliant idea, but if people don't know about it, then it doesn't matter. It's not build a better mousetrap. It's like that's 10% of the problem. The other 90% is how do you let people know you have a better mousetrap and convince them that it is better and get them to change, even if they have a mousetrap they're quite happy with, and that one might be better, but it's just a lot of work to change your buying habits and so on and so forth. Marketing, and it's what a lot of authors really don't want to deal with because writing a book is one of the most seminal challenges a person can do. There's the apocryphal stat that 99% of people who set out to write a book don't finish. And I think they mean draft one. And draft one is not a book. My draft one is unreadable by I would be embarrassed for someone to find that. This book represents like the finished product is something closer to like draft 12. Um, and that's so writing as a process is extremely difficult, and to climb that Mount Everest, or really more like to climb the whole of the Himalayas. That's what it feels like to write a book. You then are just confronted with another mountain range that is okay. Now go market it, and it's a totally different skill set. It's a totally different set of things. I did try to query this book for traditional publishing. I did want to go that route. I got a lot of full manuscript requests, which if anyone knows anything about query, I guess that's pretty good. You have to reach out. Hi, pick me. Will you read my book? And the filter is most agents just ignore you. But sometimes they say, yeah, sure, send me it. That's a huge win, but obviously that's not the finish line. And so I got a lot of full requests, and basically what I got was Catholic aliens. That sounds amazing. But when I found out your book isn't a satire, I didn't want to keep going. What's the market for people who are into religion and or aware of religion in sci-fi? Like that's like oil and water. And I had all this market research to the contrary, but they didn't care. I mean, in publishing, they have to convince an editor at a publishing house to agree, and they have their assessment of the market, which may or may not be right. Frankly, I think it's quite wrong. That's why I think there's opportunity. And yeah, like you can't convince someone if they don't think it's the right move. But I thought it was the right move. So again, coming from business, I was more comfortable with like, all right, like what does a publisher do? Like when I hand my manuscript to someone, what are the different steps they're doing? Are they really things they can do that I can't? Now, for a big five publisher, yeah, I think there's some things. The biggest thing is the imprimatur of your the basically the blessing that this made it through our process. It's a Penguin Random House book, which I'll never be able to replicate. But in terms of marketing and other control, I think savvy authors can do that better than the big guys. They're kind of stuck in maybe even not even the last century, maybe even the 19th century of
Right.
different approaches that they have. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna take it on myself. So one of the things I decided though is self-published books, like there's no real level, there's no real criterion. You can upload a Word document to Amazon and say you have a book. Um, I said if I'm not going to go trad, I'm going to do trad level quality. So that was investing in editors, a lot of editorial help, which I think a lot of self-published authors, frankly, don't put enough energy into. The second was cover design. I went for people who design covers for the big five publishers. And that includes interior formatting to make it look good. Um, and that also meant on the audio side. I wanted a great audio product. You can go on Fiverr and get people to read your book and create the necessary files to upload to Audible. I wanted something more. So I partnered with Jeff Hayes, who's did the audiobook Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a huge bestseller right now. The Trad it started self, but now Trad has picked it up, Penguin Random House, for Ace, one of their imprints, and it's selling like hotcakes. It's going absolutely insane. So we did a great audio product, multicast, sound effects, tasteful amount. You listen to it, Robin, so you can tell me what you think. And then finally, in terms of you have to get the word out there. So I did a big advanced reader campaign, ARC, and I did actually pay for some advertising. on podcasts because I was like, this is where I think my readers are. And so I paid for mid-roll ad reads, and that helped get the ball rolling. And there's a lot of other marketing tactics that I've done that, frankly, I found from Googling. It's nothing too esoteric. I think other than advertising on podcasts, that's probably the most esoteric thing I did. But you really just have to put your back into it and accept that you have to go up the learning curve in this whole other knowledge domain. Even though you wrote a book and it might be like one of the hardest things you've ever done, you have to do this whole other thing too. And most authors, I understand why they don't put their effort into it, but that's the difference between people knowing about your book and your friends and family being the only one to know.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I think it was uh, an excellent production with multiple performers, and it's not just simply a narration like most audiobooks that I've listened to. Is that a proper performance, and it really brings the story to life. And so I think, and also the the cover art. I think you made a wise choice with that because it is very striking. You know, you've got this spaceship looming over the Vatican. I really like that.
Let's see if I can.
Well, do we, I can show it on screen. It's blurred out at the minute, but I'll definitely show it on the screen. Oh,
There
there
you
we
go.
go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry
Um,
about that. I know you can make the production better, but I had to plug my book.
so before we wrap things up, do you have any future writing plans? Are there any other books that are in the pipeline?
Yes. So this novel ends about 50 days after the aliens get here. A lot happens in this book. Um, but I think the aliens are still on Earth at the very end. And I think there's way more to be said about that world in particular and Austin in particular. So I anticipate that this book will be the first of a trilogy. And I'm going to begin to round that out over, going forward. But more generally, I hope to really be writing at these kind of metaphysical, kind of high concept questions that have been ignored typically in the sci-fi space. I think there's a lot of room to run there. I have other ideas for other stories, and yeah, you should expect to be seeing more of that from me as time goes on.
Oh, fantastic. So we can look forward to more in the Pilgrims universe. I'll 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 look out for that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
definitely. You're
yeah,
on my list. I want you to read an advance copy next time, Robin. So I'll keep you posted.
thank you. Yeah, that's about it for today. Thank you, Michael, for your time today and also for sharing the audiobook with me. So I'm going to recommend this book to anyone who's watching this. Um, I think it's a highly accomplished and thought-provoking first contact story that deals with religious themes in quite an interesting and innovative way, which, um, yeah, I think your book deserves to get more attention.
Thank you. And most of my readers are actually not religious at all. This was written for the non-religious people. Certainly, I have some Catholic fans because the aliens are Catholic, but most of my readers have no religion. So don't let that scare you. This is a first contact story that is very unique. And by the time you put it down, no matter what you think about it, everyone agrees it's original and it's unique. So it's a fun thing to add to the vocabulary of sci-fi stories.
Yes, I would echo that point because I'm not religious myself, but I got a lot out of it, and yeah, I think anyone who enjoys thought-provoking science fiction will get something out of this.
Oh, thanks so much, Robin. I really appreciate you hearing that and appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.